exploring as we look ahead to 2024 and beyond. Please give a huge Cardano Summit 2023 welcome to JJ Seiler and Charles Hoskinson!
Need to turn this on. All right. Hello, everybody.
Hello?
Hello, hello.
They gave us a lot of chairs.
I know. We got backup chairs just in case this one breaks, I think. So.
We could do a Clint Eastwood and just talk to the chair.
Well, thank you, everyone, for coming to the closing session here with Mr. Charles. It's very nice to see you all here. I hope you've had a great summit so far. I think the topic here is looking ahead to 2024, and there's a lot to be excited about. And Charles, what do you think about the conference so far? How do you think we've adapted here, the summit to Dubai?
Well, the conference is absolutely amazing. First off, thank you, Cardano Foundation, for the amazing job you guys did. Every year they do this, it gets better and better. And unfortunately, I missed the party yesterday in the desert. There was like stuff on fire and dancers, and you could bribe the camel people to let you like take the camels around and all these things. And
I saw the word Cardano in fire.
Yeah, that's just
amazing.
a great idea.
The fire was a big hit. Oh, gosh. Note to self, more things on fire in 2024.
Well, here's the thing. So I was sick last night. I gave my keynote, and I was just crashed. And actually, Tam was supposed to be right here, and her voice went out, and Jared's sick, and all the things. Like, everybody is just, like, down.
That's the ultimate party favorite nowadays.
Yeah, I know.
Thing in the back of your throat.
But at least we're here. And so thank you all for coming. It means the world to us.
Yes. So looking ahead, what do you expect growth in the ecosystem to look like in 2024? Obviously, there's been a lot of efforts in the past year to improve scalability with Hydra as an open source project now, bringing in lots of different diverse voices onto those calls. Looking ahead, Mithril having gone onto mainnet, Mithril 2 paper just published now. Very excited to think about what the future of the protocol looks like in 2024.
You know, what's nice is that we don't give up, we gain. You know, it's kind of funny, people live in this low attention span Twitter mentality that when you announce a new thing, they say, oh, well, that must mean you've stopped working on all that other stuff that's over there. It's like there's an active work stream for input endorsers. It's called Ouroboros Laos. Mithril is an ongoing project. We're able to bootstrap Daedalus in the lab in 20 minutes, 3 days to 20 minutes. That's pretty impressive. Hydra is an ongoing concern. And there are teams and people that go to work every single day, in aggregate total hundreds of people across the entire ecosystem, in addition to all the new things we're doing. What's really nice is that when you kind of think about it, you look at where it goes year by year, we have the best scaling concept, because we're the ones who it's easiest to do things off-chain and on-chain. UTXO is quite amenable to a lot of roll-up technologies and proofs. Plutus is evolving at a very comfortable pace. But also the open source community is starting to build some great projects. For example, Akin. Anybody use Akin here? There's a few people. We did not create that.
No, that's not IOG,
yeah,
but Akin is amazing.
It is. And
so supportive.
And it compiles to Plutus Core, but that's what happened with the JVM. People got tired of writing Java, and so they created their own surface languages. They compiled to the JVM. Well, analogously, people didn't want to write Plutus code, but they liked what was underneath it, so they created Akin. It compiles down, and it's a very small team, like just a few people, and it's giving a lot of things. So the development of that ecosystem, and when you kind of look at where that's going, you know, it's going to be very easy for us to be best in class in scaling over a 3 to 5 year time period, but preserve and protect the principles that make Cardano awesome. The thing is, though, with partner chains, which we announced yesterday, that then allows us to be multimodal, which is a very powerful concept. This idea that you can have different consensus layers and different network stacks and transaction logic and different levels of privacy inside the system for different business use cases. that's a unique capability, and it's a very big differentiator from Ethereum or other systems. And so that's super exciting to do that in a very non-parasitic way to the system. So I love the roadmap. I think it's the strongest roadmap of any cryptocurrency. And I think that we've made more progress on it this year than we've made in any year in the history of the project. And things are really coming together, especially on development diversity. If you look at the GitHub commits, I think there's 15 to 20 independent companies that are working in some way, in some fashion, some form on either core technology or on smart contracts or in the surrounding ecosystem around it. Community came together, SIP 95, remember that? And we were supposed to be the first to implement that with Lace, but
got beat to the punch.
Somebody beat us to the punch.
That's
damn
great.
It. I love it and I hate it at the same time.
I know. It's good though. I mean, there's some measure of decentralization. We've got these standards, and they can be implemented by any team in the ecosystem now. So.
Yeah. What's cool about the culture is whenever we announce something, there's always this desire amongst the community to say, can we beat I/O to actually implementing this, be first to market? And often we actually get beaten, which is pretty cool.
It's a good benchmark, right?
Yeah.
Well, certainly we want to celebrate the massive achievements of the IOG core development team as well. Their immense efforts have taken the protocol to new heights.
Yeah, where's Sam? Sam, you in here?
There he is.
There he is, and there's Kevin. You guys stand up, eh?
SanchoNet is live. Sancho.network.
Sancho.network.
Yeah, that was a good clip from the last from Rarivo.
Sancho.network. Yeah.
Sancho.network.
What was that again? Sancho.
So if you want to become a tester of the new governance framework, you can talk to Sam personally, but if you want to check out the website, it's Sancho.network.
Sancho.network.
That's right.
Yeah,
so.
There we go. So if I say it 3 times, you'll remember it. But you know, it's what's amazing about that is that the feature set continues to grow. I think they're on 2 to 4 week release cycles, depending upon the various nodes. And we're already starting to see a lot of people having the discussions that are absolutely essential about how, in practice, will a DREP be a DREP, or you actually communicate with people who've delegated to you as a DREP, and what software is required, what solutions exist. And what's really cool is that there are a ton of projects in the Cardano ecosystem that have actually solved these problems for themselves. And now it's kind of a marketplace of ideas, and people are bringing those ideas to bear in SanchoNet. So it's going to be real fun to see how those evolve in the next 3 to 6 months. And it's really cool to see them grow. You know, the other thing is it shows this is truly a community project. If you look at the evolution of SIP 1694, it was a very small workshop in the beginning, and it started with a PKI conversation of expanding the Genesis keys to a constitutional committee, and then DREPs were added, then the SPOs were added, but then workshops happened. And I think we had over 50 workshops around the world, more than 20 countries, in a very short period of time, just a few months. And it was so cool to see it go from what was in Longmont, Colorado, in our office, to Scotland, going from a dozen or so to like 200 people or something like that. It was a crazy amount.
If you hosted a SIP workshop, if you're in the room, can you raise your hand? I'm curious how many people we have here. There's more than a few.
Yeah, we got a few. All right.
All right, good. Very nice. Well, there'll be a huge number of workshops in the coming year, too, as we work and we look ahead to the Constitution, or a concept of a Cardano Constitution. Do you have I want to chat a little bit about the workshops that we're thinking about and what that kind of interim phase will look like for a Constitution moving forward.
Yeah, so there's a world of difference between protocol level governance and ultimately the governance of a digital nation. And these are separate concerns, and they're interconnected in that one needs to drive the other, but they're different. So the very first thing that has to be established is that you have to understand that when you have an on-chain government system, you have what's called a self-amending system.
Right.
This is not a new concept. This is something that Peter Suber came up with in the 80s. And a self-amending system is awesome, but it can have downsides in that you can use the system to break the system. Mm-hmm. So the point of guardrails is to put some regulating concerns inside of it that slow down your ability to screw up the system.
Right.
They don't prevent you from screwing up the system, but they at least slow it down a little bit. You know, it's like speed bumps or something. Technically speaking, you can go really fast, but maybe you mess your car up or something.
You might lose your transmission on the way.
Exactly, right. So the first iteration is just basically, let's get some baseline guardrails. I think Kevin wrote the first document. There's 40 different parameters of concern. And then can we describe as many of those as possible with a governance smart contract to constrain the behaviors of the Constitutional Committee? That's awesome, but that doesn't really get you where you'd like to go, which is actually creating legal personality and agency for Cardano as a whole. So you guys are building all this stuff on Cardano. You're deploying dApps, you have customers, you have property. Over 8 million assets have been issued on Cardano. And that's awesome. The problem is right now, for all blockchain systems, when you issue an asset on a blockchain, when you issue a smart contract, most jurisdictions in the world have no legal personality or agency to that. In fact, we're going in the opposite direction. In the United States, there's been some very troubling court cases where they're saying things like DAOs are unincorporated associations or co-ops,
right.
Which means as a token holder participating in governance, potentially you have personal liability and you don't have indemnity. That's really concerning. So the next stage after you get really good at having a process in place to talk about guardrails to prevent your self-amending system from blowing itself up is to start talking about how do we create legal personality and agency for the things that live within the system. You do this by processes like dispute resolution,
right.
Digital signature rights,
property rights.
Yeah, property rights, these types of things. And we have a lot of cool ideas. It turns out a treaty was signed in 1958. Over 150 countries signed it. It was signed in New York. Soviet Union, United States signed it, which courts would then honor alternative dispute resolution, arbitration. So it may be possible to create a legal framework that most of the countries in the world would recognize where the blockchain itself, Cardano, is actually an arbitrator, and smart contracts have legal rights, and people who participate in the system do that. So when you talk about the evolution of the Constitution, kind of the next phase of it is, can you create property rights? Can you create consent? Can you create identity and these types of things? And can you actually get jurisdictions to recognize that? And that's I think, the next meaningful goal in the evolution of the system. And then the final level of it is then saying, okay, how do you then wire and reconcile the legacy legal systems with this new digital nation that we've constructed that is Cardano, and have these things kind of work with each other? So all of next year, 2024, is about bringing the community together to have this plus many other conversations. And you start at Intersect, because it's a good nexus. I think we have now 800 members that have joined and many more on the way.
Yes, and if you've not signed up as an Intersect member, make sure you check out the website, Intersect MBO, Cardano MBO. Would love to have you as a member. It's a beautiful time to join right now.
And there's a civics committee at Intersect, and that's a starting point for those conversations, but follow the exact same process that we followed with SIP 1694, and that workshops can materialize. But the difference is, instead of just having workshops, have the workshops elect a delegate.
Right.
And I'd love to see 100 to 200 of them all around the world, and have all those delegates aggregate somewhere for a constitutional convention, and then basically have the convention ratify a constitution, and then have the network ratify the constitution through 1694. And it would be really fun to start making some progress on that, the philosophy as well as the practice of these things.
This is an interesting point, because we spent a good deal of 2023 working on SIP 1694 as a community. So how do you imagine SIP 1694 kind of feeding into this process?
Well, there's enough juice in SIP 1694 to run a blockchain pretty well. There are 7 governance actions inside of it. And everything from the maintenance of the governance set itself, like replacing the Constitutional Committee through no confidence, to protocol parameters, to Treasury, and to hard forks. And there's some new stuff that's introduced that we as a community have yet to do. And there's some very important conversations that have to be held. So I assume everybody in here is familiar with Catalyst, show of hands. Yeah, everybody knows Catalyst.
All right.
Currently, Catalyst is the only mechanism upon which we access the Cardano Treasury. Well, that's great, but that's like saying, you have a garden hose to access your water from the tank. It's very small throughput. There's a lot of water in the tank. The Cardano Treasury has a lot of funds in it, but not a lot of it gets emitted out. And that was by design because you had to wait for a governance system to be in place. Now that there's a governance system in place, technically speaking, 1694 would allow the community to open up the Treasury for things that aren't related to Catalyst. So in practice, you'd have to treat it like a government. And what a government does is they have budget, little pie chart, right? You have slices in the pie. You have your slice for development and your slice for marketing and your slice for bureaucracy and your slice for, buying an island somewhere or whatever the hell you guys want to do. So, but you have to draw the pie and you have to decide how big of a pie is that going to be. Is it $50 million? Is it $100 million? So one of the biggest governance challenges actually next year is going to be how do we as a community come together and decide on an annual budget for how much funds should be actually spent out of the Cardano treasury. Because everybody comes to me and they say things. They're like, well, we need to be better at marketing.
Right.
Okay. Well, we need to be better at adoption. Okay, well, we need to be $5 million better? Do we need to be $10 million? Like, how much should we actually spend as a community on these types of things?
As you've said, the budget kind of reflects priorities.
Exactly. Yeah. People always tell you who they are, and when somebody says it's a priority, I say, how much are you prepared to spend? And the dollar amount really tells you something. So if somebody comes and I support you, you say, oh, great, is the check in the mail? Simple, money talks. And so we as a community actually have to decide that. And we have to decide where the priorities are with industry verticals like enterprise and government, geographies. People say, what's our LATAM strategy or what's our Africa strategy or these types of things. These are all examples of things that have to be discussed. So the idea is that I would love to set a budget committee at Intersect and bring the community together similar to the civics committee and just basically have some preliminary discussions about best practices in general of how governments and firms and NGOs do budgeting. But at the end of the day, we have to make a decision. The government of Cardano actually has to approve it. There's enough power in 1694 to be able to approve something like that. That's awesome. And then my hope is that becomes an annual process where we create a best practice or a precedent and we just get used to a budget season. You do it in a quarter and then you kind of approve it through a democratic process. What's exciting about that is that it's going to create a lot more funding diversity, meaning other development firms, other marketing firms, purpose-built ecosystem growth firms, but it also brings up some very interesting accountability questions, which is what audit and oversight is required for a process like this? If we give money to somebody, what do you expect in return in terms of reporting? And how often should that reporting come through? Is that quarterly? Is that annually? In the United States, we have things like the Government Accountability Office, the Congressional Budget Office. We have dozens of institutions in the U.S. And Europeans have an equivalent. Switzerland has an equivalent. These things that basically tell you how money is being spent. They provide transparency.
Right.
So we have to decide that as well at the same time.
Well, changing topics a little bit, I certainly appreciate the thoughts on the future of governance in Cardano. Looking at IOG and how input-output is changing as a company, be very interested in discussing what your vision is for Lace and where you see it going. Obviously, we've gotten to a monthly release cadence, new features and new different items are coming out every month now. What do you see as the future of Lace and a kind of a decentralized architecture for wallets in the ecosystem?
So Lace is one of my favorite products, and I love whenever you finally have something that is consumer-facing. See, we mentioned Lace, people are already getting up and leaving. Bye. Okay, so the thing about Lace is that it is kind of a crossroads where the rubber meets the road, and you actually have to be serious about a consumer. So when you build core infrastructure like Hydra and Mithril and Ouroboros, your end user doesn't see anything.
Middleware.
They don't see middleware. They just feel the consequences of it, better, faster, cheaper, the security consequences, design trade-offs. But with Lace, they actually have to download and install it, use it, and if you've done a bad job, they tell you by uninstalling it. You have a churn rate, right? And you can tell by your user acquisition and your churn rate, you can tell by your ratings, you can tell by what they're doing and how they're using it, whether it's interesting software or not. And the thing is, we can't talk about mass adoption if your on and off ramp is not good. So we as a company, we have to be obsessed every single day at the end user, the consumer level, because this informs on how to build better products. And one of the flaws of I/O, I would say, is we haven't been as customer focused or as consumer focused as we needed to be, which led to some inflexibility in certain parts of the tech stack and certain parts of our approach. So what Lace does is it's a correction in that culture, and also it's a great opportunity to give consumers completely new ways of thinking about things. And I'll just give you a few examples where we as an industry have failed miserably. So grandma downloads and installs a wallet, and now she has a wallet, and now she's just sending transactions to people. Well, when she sends transactions to people, there's no antivirus, there's no warning system. Okay, so you send it this smart contract or that smart contract, it just goes. Well, what if you had a system which kind of peeks through and before you initiate the transaction gives you best available information about where you're sending that to? If we had such a system, there would be no giveaway scams, because it would instantly tell you there's a giveaway scam. This is not a real address, it's a known thing. Or this dApp is actually a counterfeit dApp, and this is not the real Uniswap, or this is not the real thing.
It sounds a bit like HTTPS, where you've got some sort of signal coming back to confirm that it's the correct website.
Yeah, exactly right. That little lock in the browser or something like that. We don't have that as a consumer product. So what this translates to is that sending crypto for people, including me, can be scary. You know, and that's just a fact for everybody in the space. We double check, we send a test transaction, we read the address 5 times. How many people here have like double, triple, quadruple checked an address?
How many people here have sent one ADA as a test
transaction? Guys, we're the early adopters, really technical people. Let's be honest here. So is that great for grandma? No. So if you're really going to build a product for hundreds of millions, billions of people in the ecosystem, and the world, to be frank, you have to really start thinking through how do you make this safe. The same for recovery. Like, we like to say, okay, be your own wallet, own your own keys. That's great, but what happens when you die? Mark Zuckerberg had this problem. You know, when Facebook first came out, it's like, well, I was a college student. It's like, we didn't really think about people dying. It doesn't happen very much. Turns out when you build a multi-billion person system, like tens of thousands of your users die every single day.
You talked about this on the Lex interview.
Yeah, exactly. And so these are things you just don't consider, but these are super important. So estate planning, account recovery, being able to designate people to recover your account if you perish. These are all the bread and butter of a normal financial system. They're already solved in the legacy world, but we in the Web3 world haven't done a phenomenal job of resolving those. So when you're a wallet builder, you actually start thinking about this stuff, and you start imagining, is there some new way of solving these problems where you preserve and protect the consumer experience, but you solve it in a better way that doesn't require middlemen or centralization or custodians or other such things. And we have all this amazing research capacity. We have all these incredible cryptographers, and it turns out there's some really cool stuff. Many of you know about Atala Prism. That's this amazing DID framework. Well, I can't wait to pull that into the wallet space, because then you have wallet plus identity. You have a basis upon which you can start talking around these things, both on the receiving and sending side. So I love having Lace around because it forces an all-of-company conversation. How do you be relentlessly consumer focused? How do you actually make the technology simple? How do you explain things in a simple way? How do you handle account creation in a simple way? And that provides a lot of information about where the protocol should go and how we should think about that protocol to the maximum benefit of the consumer. And if we get it right, we'll have millions of new people come. The other thing, a very important point, Lace will be multi-chain, multi-asset. And I would love Lace to be not only the best Cardano wallet, but the best Bitcoin wallet, the best Ethereum wallet, because I'd like to use it as a channel to bring Bitcoin and Ethereum into Cardano.
Right.
We have the best ecosystem, but unless I build bridges from the mainland to our island, cars can't come to us. So if we do an awesome job with Lace, what can happen is you can build ramps so that people in the Ethereum space can use Cardano apps, and people in the Bitcoin space can use Cardano apps, and bring TVL and traffic from that side of the world and make it seamless to wrap it. So it's really important to me, because I'd like for the rest of the industry to finally visit our homeland and actually get to know Cardano and bring millions of users in. So I think this is the product to build, but it's a challenging one. And we've done some things like we bought Nami, for example, because we recognize we need to have a great entry-level user mode for normal everyday people, and Nami did a phenomenal job, and Alessandro was kind of leaving the ecosystem and moving on. And so we said, well, instead of shutting it down, why don't we come on in, take it over, and kind of work with your guys and imagine what a really beautiful, simple wallet would be, and put a Nami mode into Lace.
Yeah,
so
and just to be clear, I believe Alessandro's still working on things like the Lucid library, and he might be doing other NFT collections. I don't think he's obviously sold Nami to IOG, which is a very exciting moment for Lace, and user numbers are going way up, and we're going to develop Nami mode, which is a very simple to use mode. But it's, I think what you're trying to say is that Lace is also going for number one. It's not just protocol development.
Yeah, but he's not actively running projects on Cardano like he did Space Buds and these things, and he maintains things like Lucid, but it's not like he has a commercial product anymore inside of it. And so he wanted to move to different parts in his life, and running a wallet's hard. It's a full-time job. I think Alessandro was putting 60 to 80 hours a week into that.
At its height, it just went crazy over the course of like a 2-month period last year or so.
And it's hard for people to make that kind of commitment, for product, especially for open source products. And so we took that upon ourselves to try to integrate that in. And I see a lot of value in that.
Well, you read my mind, actually. Open source is my next question here. And we had the opportunity to go to the Hyperledger's Members Summit event in San Francisco. And Atala has started to participate in some of these open source project discussions at the Hyperledger level. And it'd be wonderful to hear your thoughts on what IOG's involvement with open source projects in the near future should look like.
Yeah, you bring up a very valid point. So most people who aren't really paying attention, when they hear Hyperledger, they only hear one word, Hyperledger Fabric.
Right.
And they say IBM. Hyperledger's got like 30 projects inside of it.
Oh, and the branding is awesome. They all have these little icons. They've got their own color. You have to check it out.
They have
a lot of cool
Firefly
projects.
and Cacti and Indie. And
Noncred.
Solang from Solana is inside Hyperledger. Did you guys know that? Like Solana is part of Hyperledger. There's so many different things. Besu is like the #3 Ethereum client, and it's inside Hyperledger. So it's a family of open source programs and projects, and it has a huge enterprise community. And if you're a Fortune 500 company, if you're really seriously considering blockchain, your first stop is not Ethereum, it's not Solana, it's not Hashgraph, it's not Cardano, it's Hyperledger. That's the beginning point. So we've had a great relationship with the Hyperledger project, kind of silently. We never made a big deal about it, but for several years we've known Daniela, we've known all the major people there like Brian. In fact, Fabric in particular, Christian Cashin was the scientist who developed that for IBM. We've written papers with him, we've known him, he's based in Switzerland, brilliant guy. So we decided that we'd take a more active role in it because we wanted to better understand where's the enterprise world going and what standards are they interested in? Because at the end of the day, everything inside the Hyperledger framework is Apache 2 as a license. And what that translates to is that those things are ours. We can use them at any time. There's no patents, there's no nothing. So when you talk about how do you make your technology interoperable with where the enterprise world is going, that's your one-stop shop. Not a standard like ISO 222 or whatever Twitter cares about. That's the group of people that you talk to. And so not only are we putting projects like Atala Prism, for example, we're open coring it and it's going into the Hyperledger framework, but future projects will also be put there. And then we take things out. Like when we talk about the roadmap, what we'd like to do is start talking about interoperability and how do we build bridges so that things on Cardano can also touch the enterprise world as well.
That's right. It's part of a broader approach to interoperability. It's not just between blockchains, it's between corporate entities as well.
Yeah.
Would love to hear your thoughts on RealFi, which is a new company, a subsidiary at IO, and John O'Connor's leadership there, transitioning from the Director of African Operations, and what your hopes are for 2024, what RealFi can become as a company.
So John is one of the unsung heroes. You know, he never gets enough praise. He's been running around for 6 years.
I believe he was the first hire at the Cardano Foundation.
He was one of the first hires, if not the first hire. It was either him or Bruce Milligan. I can't remember. But John basically spent 6 years living in Ethiopia and other places, and he visited, I think, more than 20 African countries. And what he did is he spent an enormous amount of time doing some pilot deals and learning, engaging with African leaders, and trying to develop enough domain expertise to develop a thesis about how can we use blockchain to transform Africa over the next 10 or 20 years. What foundational real-world applications, assets, and use cases can we invest in and deploy such that over 10, 20 years, hundreds of millions of people can go into those systems and enjoy what we've set up with Cardano. So for example, he negotiated the Ethiopia deal, which is still on, still working on it. I know Twitter seems to think it's not around, but we're working on it.
It's very much live, it's happening.
Yeah,
Diplomas are on the blockchain.
You know, we just said, we have Dave Harding and John and record some stuff about it, Cardano 360. It's a little challenging at times, you know. I guess some things are going on there.
Yeah, civil war tends to disrupt Ministry of Education projects, but you know, it's still going. It's actually survived administrations. So.
I know, you know, so it's a pretty durable project. But you know, the thing is that he set up that program and project. We learned a lot from it, and he went to Burundi with us. He went to South Africa with us. He went with the World Mobile guys and asked, "Where are you guys?" Yeah, there we go. We were in Zanzibar together. You know, that was a lot of fun. And so now he's based in Kenya, and we've set up a company called RealFi. And what the company's doing is it's building a network of networks to get small cap MFIs the funding that they need to be able to deploy microfinance loans to businesses and individuals at a very low rate. Like, for example, $100 loans, $200 loans, people in Nairobi and other areas. And our hope is to lower those interest rates from 85% down to something much more manageable.
Just to be clear, you said that people in sub-Saharan Africa are currently receiving loans at a rate of 80% interest on the principal.
Or higher.
Right.
And so we'd like to get those rates down, and we'd like to eventually apply Web3 principles, meaning the identity, the credit scoring, the value transfer medium, all of these components are basically done by a cryptocurrency, in this case Cardano. So there are a lot of challenges in this business model. You have to have the right stable coin, you have to have the right identity system, you have to have the right settlement system. So he's building all that plumbing out, from the aggregation to the network of networks of how do you select the MFIs and how do they push through, how does that credit data come back, how do you blind that in a way that preserves privacy, and it's an incredibly hard job. But if it's done in the right way, then what you can do is very rapidly start deploying millions and eventually billions of dollars of capital all throughout Africa on a reliable basis and bring a lot of impact capital money in. But that's not being brought in through the traditional banking system. Over time, it gets brought in through the cryptocurrency rails. And then eventually that becomes a completely peer-to-peer endeavor, and that becomes a Web3 DeFi protocol that can run on Cardano. So this is something that's very near and dear to my heart, and we thought we'd be able to get it out a little sooner, but no blockchain is ready. People have tried, like Goldfinch and others, and they haven't had success because that last mile is so brutally hard. But we think we came up with some cool ways to do it, and John's definitely the guy to lead that. He wants it more than anybody else, and I think this is his legacy, and it's certainly something we're heavily invested in.
Now, the other side of the RealFi company, as you said, stable tokens are going to become very, very important in this business model to service those loans at a more attractive interest rate. What do you hope to see come out of the new stable token company that's at IOG here in 2024?
Yeah, we got 6 companies in the portfolio that are being spun out. It's pretty cool, isn't it?
Quite a bit going on in
input output. Yeah, there's a lot going on. You know, we're pretty busy guys. So Stablecoin Co. So Sean Ford is a real good friend of mine, and he was the CEO over at Algorand, and for a long time he was over there in various roles, from operating officer to CEO, and he was heading out, and I called him up. I said, "Sean, what are you doing?" And he said, "I'm moving to Wyoming." I said, "Really?" And I said, "Can I convince you to come to Wheatland?" And he's like, "Well, I'm close. I'm in Sheridan." And I said, "Sean, would you like to do something with me?" And he said, "Well, what do you have in mind?" And I said, "You know, one of the most important things we got to get sorted out in the Cardano ecosystem is stablecoins. It's kind of a thing. And so I'd like to set up a dedicated company to aggregate all of our efforts together." And he's the best guy in the world, because when he was at Algorand, he did the Bank of Italy, he did the Bank of South Africa, he took over the El Salvador deal from us, he did the Marshall Islands. He's been everywhere. He's like Mr. Stablecoin CBDC guy. He's like, he's got all this figured out, right? So I said, all right, you know, you come on in and take that portfolio. We'll put Jet in it. We'll put other things inside of it, and kind of get that done. So long and short is that Sean is building a great team of people, and they're talking about the whole ecosystem around that. from the regulatory ecosystem, like in Wyoming, we created the Speedy Bank with Lindholm and the others. Well, let's figure out how to make the world love that and make it the best place to issue stablecoins from, to algorithmic stability mechanisms, to what are the payment rails need to look like, all these types of things to wire it in. And so, it's kind of in a nascent form, but it's more of an aggregator of all the different teams that we have and efforts we have. And over time, what that company will do is basically make sure that either directly or indirectly through partnerships, that Cardano's not left behind in the stablecoin side, because it's very important that not only we get that done, but we get it done with principles.
Right.
The problem with stablecoins is the way that they're being pushed upon the space. They can be frozen, they can be reversed, they may carry draconian requirements behind them, and that's kind of antithetical to the crypto ethos. So it's very important to me that not only do we have good mechanisms of stability, we have good mechanisms of stability with integrity behind it.
With some wisdom and values.
Exactly.
The values
exactly.
Of the space.
And so that's kind of the remit and mandate of that. And I love that we have a super experienced guy to spearhead and lead that.
Yeah.
This is the new I.O. You find amazing leaders and you empower and enable those leaders to go and do something in an area. Whether it be stablecoins or Lace or Dave Harding with Atala Prism or Iran Barak with Midnight. And we kind of just give them the resources that they need to execute that vision, and we work with them to sculpt that vision. But then they show up every single day with an amazing team of people. Like Midnight, for example, has got 50 people on that team, and they go and execute and do amazing stuff. And so it's the same with Sean and Stablecoin, and we can't wait to see it grow.
The company is completely changing under the leadership of Tamara Hassan as well, really becoming an engine for these spin-out companies, and it's really fantastic. I just wanted to say thank you to the Cardano Foundation for having us here and for the wonderful hospitality and for the opportunity to talk a little bit to Charles here today. I was just a member of the community just 3 years ago and watching the AMAs, and now I'm able to come on stage and interview Charles myself and have a chat, and I'm very grateful. So thank you to all of you for being here, and we look forward to seeing you at the next summit in 2024. Thank you.
Huge thanks to Charles and JJ for a really great session, and thanks to every single one of you for being part of what has been an absolutely smash hit success summit. You have been at the very center, whether you've been inside the room or watching at any of our global watch parties or watching at home. Stay tuned for the next details on Cardano Summit 2024, and if you're joining us at the award ceremony tonight, make sure that you are there bright and early. The crowds will be big and the party will be bigger. We'll see you there, Cardano community. Take care. Good night.